Hi, everybody. I want to offer some brief remarks on the video assigned this week from Alan Watts entitled The Taoist Way. Watts is mixing concepts from a few different traditions, including Hinduism, but also from Buddhism. In the commissioning, these concepts are all interrelated with one another and have all developed in the same cultural space. So it's not unusual that Watts should do that. But listening to his video, although it is concerned with Taoism, you might benefit from some guidance about these other less familiar concepts. So let's make a little sense of that. We have here an image from the video, and I hope you enjoy watching it. One of the benefits of Alan Watts as a figure is that well, I shouldn't say as a figure, benefit of Alan Watts's materials on YouTube. Let's put it that way. If you're interested in Alan Watts, you can find countless hours of his recordings, many of which were recorded during his lifetime and have been reproduced, often with like chill step kind of lo-fi hip-hop beats in the background and images kind of like the one you find here. So there's this very popular aspect to his thinking. But let's walk through very quickly the claims he makes in this video. He starts out talking about the chain of karma. And here we have an image. This is a Tibetan image of the wheel of life, so called. But I think it's an apt illustration of what he means by the chain of karma. In the middle of this wheel, and we've seen this already in an earlier lecture on Hinduism, you have at the center three things: a bird, a snake, and a boar. The bird represents desire, the snake represents hatred, and the boar represents ignorance. And so these three things, desire, hatred, and ignorance, drive the wheel. They turn the wheel, right? And then on the right side, or I should say, well, I don't know how to do it, over there in the image, on the right side, you have demons pulling people on this chain. You see people very much against their will being drawn along. But you also see people ascending on the left side of that wheel through stages toward enlightenment. And so there's this process of being pulled down and then of the possibility of ascent with the turning of this wheel. Anyway, this we call it the round of birth and death or samsara, or we can also call it, as Watts does here, the chain of karma. Our past actions tend to bind our present actions if we let that happen. We say, I'm this kind of person, or I've always done it this way, and so I have to do it that way again. Um, what Watts identifies here as the challenge is to break that chain of karma, to escape our past karma, so that habits and attachments don't determine what we do in the present. This is, for Watts, moving us toward enlightenment. When we try to break this chain of karma, he talks about this in the video, it can be really hard to do. Because anytime you take up a new practice, let's say you have a New Year's resolution, we all know those tend to last about 3 days, right? When you state, and he talks about that, when you state your intention and you're going to do it, all your so-called creditors, and so these are the bad habits or attachments that are pulling you back into this old style of living, they come calling, Watts says, and they try to prevent you from breaking that chain of karma. So the goal, and he talks about this in the video, is to act without announcing your intention to act, without intention, right? So don't, plan to, I don't know, stop drinking, and I'm planning to do it. I'm going to do it on this day. Okay, it's tomorrow. Okay, the day is here. Now I'm going to do it. Da da da. I'm going to do it, right? In that way, you're setting yourself up for failure. He uses a couple of examples of this. One from Eugen Haragel's book, Zen and the Art of Archery, and the other from a short story by the German writer Heinrich von Kleist about a bear. In the case of archery, the goal is not to think about the shot before you do it, but simply in one fluid motion to pull and release. Right? And if you do that, that is the Zen of archery, right? You're in the moment. You're not planning to do it. The same thing with any kind of athletics, right? If you're planning to do something, you have it in your head, you're more focused on what's in your head than what's around you, and it prevents you from acting effectively. The story about the bear, it's kind of a funny short story from von Kleist. The idea is the bear always knows what your intention is. So the only way to fight or defeat the bear is to act without intention, to just move spontaneously. We see this celebration of spontaneity a lot in religious traditions of Asia. So, without any announcement, he says, we can break this chain of karma. We can escape from the patterns of living that tend to define and shape our present. In Watts's view, this is what Taoism is helping us to do, and that's why the video is called the Taoist Way, right? The Taoist Way is the quote unquote easy way, right? You might think, I want to achieve enlightenment. Well, I better go put in 40 years at the monastery. I better get up at 4 a.m. every day. I better strive. I better push. I better conform myself to some kind of fixed, pattern. And what Watts is suggesting is that the way in Taoism is different. This moment itself, third point on the slide, this moment itself is the way, the Tao, right? This moment itself, thus, is also nirvana. Nirvana is not a state that we need to fight for and strive after and grasp after and then finally get it, right? And secure it. Nirvana is a way of being in the present, and even for Watts, in this life, right? When we are enlightened, we live in this state as if we were in nirvana. Nirvana is the Buddhist word for moksha, a word we've already encountered in Hinduism, meaning enlightenment or escape from the chain of birth and death or the chain of karma. He also includes in the video a discussion of so-called sudden and gradual enlightenment. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to Buddhism. Within Buddhism, there has been some debate historically over whether enlightenment is something that is the result of a long chain of activity and study and dedication and devotion, or whether enlightenment is something that happens like this, comes quite out of the blue, quite without our intending it. There it is. We are suddenly enlightened. Watts suggests that this difference relates to different temperaments, right? Some people benefit from that long process of realization, whereas others are able to move quickly to this moment. And that is the Taoist way, specifically, to be in the moment. Now let's look at this a little more specifically. And we have here the first ever GIF that I have used. GIF, moving image in a slide. So fabulous. This is an image depicting the Zen Buddhist teacher Dogen, who's a Japanese Zen Buddhist teacher. Dogen, according to Watts, held that there is no such thing as progression in time. So I've got A, B, C, D, right? I'm moving through a sequence of things. We tend to think that B follows from A and C follows from B. Now, a moment's reflection is enough to let us know that's not the case, right? But we experience it that way. It is the alphabet, right? And we move through it. The examples that Dogen uses, however, suggest that this is not the case. So spring does not become summer. Watts emphasizes that. Or you right now, like you as you are watching this video, does not become you later, like you after you watch this video. There's no substrate, there's no basis, there's no kind of continuation from one thing into the other such that there's a becoming. There's just spring and then summer. There's you now and then you later. There's A and B and C and so forth, right? So each moment, each thought is its own specific thing. And the idea that we're moving fluidly through one thing to the other, you in the past, you in the present, you in the future, the stable self, is an illusion. Like the Barber Pool. So the Barber Pool, if you've ever seen one of these, I guess they're maybe not as common today as they were in the past, but it's simply red and blue stripes on a white background, right? But when you turn it, if you look at the image on the slide, it looks like it's moving, right? It looks like the stripes are going up, but the stripes are not going up. They're simply rotating, right? So it's an optical illusion to think that the stripes are moving up perpetually. When we stay in the present, the last point on the slide here, um, and instead of seeing that progression like the barber pole, instead of thinking that it's going up, right? If we just have thought after thought after thought, moment after moment after moment, we don't collect these together and say, aha, all of these together are the alphabet, all of these together are myself, right? Over time, if we simply stay with each individual thing, don't amalgamate it, that is, bring them together, then we are setting ourselves up for enlightenment, for the kind of realization that is the fruit of the Taoist way. So the goal then is to take this apparent progression, like the barber pole, looks like it's moving up, right? But to decouple our thoughts from one another. So, for example, in the GIF, I'll call it a GIF, right? In that image, if you open the file, as I did just a few moments ago, you'll see it's actually a sequence of single images, like any animation, right? But then the rapid movement of those images, or the appearance of those images on the screen, makes it look like movement is occurring. This is pretty much what Watts is saying that we should do. Instead of taking the barber pole with all those together as a progression, just look at each separate image, right? And each of those images is its own thing. Each of those images has its own suchness, and that's the word we're getting to. It just is what it is. It's not in relation to anything else. It's not problematic or good or bad. It's just simply what it is. This is very hard to do, to break apart our experience and to experience just this moment, right? Not this moment as me engaged in a certain task or accomplishing a purpose or doing my homework or whatever else, but just be in this moment as it is. In music, for example, he points out the notes that we have, da 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 da, right? So there's a little melody for you. The notes have meaning in relation to the other notes. So once you decouple all of your thoughts from each other, once you take the pictures of the barber pole and you break them up, right, they don't have the same kind of meaning that they did because the meaning came from the relationships. So in a way, it looks like this decoupling, this breaking down of our experience into individual moments makes each moment kind of meaningless or kind of senseless, right? It's as if we're doing away with the world, like there is nothing, right? Um, but what Watts holds, and we'll see that he's getting to the moral of the story here, which is this is a stage in this Taoist way, is that each of those moments has its own integrity, its own suchness. As we said, it is what it is, right? Take the example of death, which he mentions. Death is tragic due, as we say on the slide here, due to a perceived loss of our past, right? Everything that we've done and accomplished, our identity, it looks like is going away. But if you take death as simply a moment on its own, not as a termination of everything else in relation to everything that came before, then death itself is not something to be feared. That moment on its own is simply what it is. It has a certain suchness about it. So here's our last slide with kind of content. We'll have one more with a little story on it. So he calls this the Taoist trick. Right? So remember, we started trying to break the chain of karma. Well, how are we going to do that? Are we going to work really hard and strive and like make a to-do list and work through it? No, he says, this is the easy way. Like Taoism has a very simple message, according to Alan Watts. It is simply to live now. And if you simply live now, there will be no problems. Live in the now, right? Not worried about what's coming later tonight or coming tomorrow or what happened yesterday or, something that happened earlier in your life. Let go of those attachments to the present. And you will find, as expressed in this Zen saying that he quotes, that every day is a good day. Because on its own, even like the moment of death itself, each moment can be seen as good. It has its kind of suchness, its own integrity, its own identity. If you're able to see it for just that, just what it is, then you'll find that there's no there's no place for effort or striving or trying to get somewhere else, right? You are right now precisely where you need to be to realize enlightenment. So the aim, he says, and this is the last point I want to make that he makes, I really emphasize it because this brings it home, guys. The aim is to be firmly established in the suchness of the moment, as we've been talking about, and then, this is the coup de grace, right? And then, from that position, to re engage with the past and the future. So the goal is not to live in a completely senseless way, in a state where nothing is anything else, nothing is in relation to anything else. Like, yes, that is a moment on the path, but that's not where you remain. And here we have a famous Zen story that he concludes with. And I've just written down a direct quotation here from Watts in the video. And he's telling a well known story. So he says, to the naive person, mountains are mountains, waters are waters. Here we have an image of mountains and waters. Pretty straightforward stuff. A mountain is a mountain, water is a body of water. To the intermediate student, mountains are no longer mountains, waters are no longer waters. Why? Well, think about what we learned in Nisargadatta, right? And from our study of Hinduism. A mountain or waters is just an expression of something underlying it. It's just Brahman, right? Or in Buddhism, as we will learn later, there is the doctrine of no self, of anatman. So everything that looks to have form, right, is actually empty. It's not what it appears to be. Enlightenment is the realization of that. And so to the intermediate student, everything looks kind of crazy, right? Everything looks different. Everything looks empty. However, to the fully perfected student, mountains are again mountains and waters are again waters. So what does he mean by this? Once you make the full round, right? You've started from this chain of karma, right? You've moved on to a position where you've decoupled all of those thoughts and attachments and moments, and you're looking at each one just in its suchness, right? You're in this kind of no mountains, no rivers phase, right? But then once you re-engage, once you move from that position of enlightenment, or of kind of pre-enlightenment, right, at the crucial stage, on to realize that, okay, now I can see the past and I can see the future in a way that's not determining and controlling my present, right? I'm now going to live in the present in a way that's free of worry about the past and the future. That's when you get to this final stage. Mountains are again mountains and waters are again waters. You see everything in the same way, in a certain sense, but also now transformed through your new perspective that you've gained by following the Taoist way. And so, friends, we can see that he's mixing terms here from various traditions, but it's a good reminder that often these are mixed. And the path that he's describing here has been something very influential in the history of the reception of Asian spiritualities in the Western context. So I hope you enjoy the video from Alan Watts. Thank you.